Please keep yourself on mute during the presentation. Well, this isn't so much a presentation, it's going to be a Q&A, but to kind of organize the questions and everything so nobody's talking on top of each other, please use the chat function to present your questions, and we will go through those. There will be a poll at the end of the meeting. Please take the time to fill out the poll as we get through that. Here's the upcoming schedule. Next Wednesday, we got the Golden Ratio, presented by Worshipful Brother Andrew Niemeyer. Fundraising, Beyond the Pancake Breakfast by Worshipful Brother Brad Phelps. Legal Presentations Made Easy by Worshipful Brother Andrew Niemeyer. And so on. Below, you'll see the link of the for the website, so you can link into those and view all the other presentations. Another reminder of the Show and Tell Challenge. This is a video essay, poetry, art, etc. Basically answering the 3 questions you see in the bullet points here. What is Freemasonry in Minnesota? What will your life and legacy say about Freemasonry? How will you help others to find a way to the rewards of the craft? Use your creativity to answer those questions, and you receive a chance to win a commemorative plaque for your lodge. And then there's the link on the bottom. Now for the presentation. Most Worshipful Grand Master Ethan Seaberg. Take it away.
Well, thank you. As Mike mentioned, and let me get this screen back here. As you have questions, please do put them in the chat. I wanted to start out, well, first of all, by thanking everybody for being here and showing an interest in being misinformed. It's supposed to be a joke, but thank you for the time. I wanted to start with the most frequent question I guess I've gotten since we did this last time, and it's been something about a Minnesota Mason article about social media. It boils down into 2 parts. Can Freemasonry really tell me what I can and can't say? And what gives you the right? And a lot of times there's a lot more editorial in those questions. One of the things that was helpful for me is a brother attorney in our craft shared with me about the First Amendment, that it's supposed to protect us from criminal prosecution. But there are decades and decades and decades of precedent where private clubs can set standards of conduct, and if you violate those standards, you can be asked to leave. So yes is the first question. Thankfully, we've got a process and adjudication that gets you there. It's not a summary removal, praise the Lord. But yes, you can. And I guess one of the surprising questions, that second part has been surprising to me. What gives you the right? Because we've all gone through the same degrees. We all heard about cardinal virtues and the tenets of the organization. And we're going to talk a bit about getting back to degree work. But I was asked to read the charge at our first degree, which is coming up at the end of the month. And so I was supposed to tell Foster, I printed it out, so I'm all set to go. But in that, I highlighted a couple of passages that we've all heard 1,000 times, yet it speaks to exactly what we're talking about here. This first part, the greatest and best of men of all ages have been encouragers and promoters of the art, and have never deemed it derogatory from their dignity to level themselves with their fraternity. And the second one that jumps off the page at me, there are 3 great duties which as a Mason you are charged to inculcate. The second one, to your neighbor, in acting upon the square and doing unto him as you wish he would do unto you. We tell ourselves when we enter the fraternity that we will live by the golden rule, and then we wonder why when we say terrible things on places like Facebook and Twitter, why people object and call it unmasonic conduct. And I wanted to leave you with this. I shared this with the committee chairs who were meeting on Monday night. just 4 doors down and across the street from where I'm sitting is where my folks have lived now for just about 50 years. And I got to say that some of the posts that we've seen, through these last number of months, my mother's very active on Facebook. And if I shared one of those posts, even though I'm getting close to half a century here, I know she would walk up that street and she would knock on that front door and she would say, "Is this how we raised you? Is this the way you're going to represent this family in this community?" And so I would charge the Minnesota Freemasons, and many of you know my mom, charge Minnesota Freemason with thinking about what my mother would say. Is the behavior that we're exhibiting how we were raised as Masons? And is that really how we want to be seen as a family? And I think in many cases over these last couple of months, the answer is no. So govern yourselves well, be kind, and that's really all we're talking about. We're not talking about stopping dissent. Dissent is one of the noble things you can do as an American is educated, well-reasoned dissent. But schoolyard filth is not adult dissent. So that was the question I was going to start with, and it gives me a nice opportunity then to segue into something from Larry, if that's all right. As long as I can see these questions, I know you guys can read them too, but I'll start with Larry. The degree work that's starting, and it gives me an opportunity to tell everybody here how we got there. We charge the custodians with finding a way in this COVID environment to present degrees, and that's what they're going to be, presentational. The custodians and monitors spent a couple of weekends walking through that process, and they have come up with a way to present the first degree, and that's where we're going to start. We will travel the state. Area custodians and area deputies will ensure that there's a cast. There will be a candidate that's a member of the cast. We'll maintain the distance, and it'll be much like a one-day if you were a candidate who wasn't involved directly as principal. But that's how we're going to start, and we'll hope all kinds of things like airflow. Who knew we needed an HVAC specialist? Talk about airflow. And so if there are places that would like to have degrees go on, and lodges quite simply aren't set up for that. The Grand Lodge and the corporate board has given permission to find a place to do that. If it's a hotel, if it's an event center, we'll go there and at least start the process. Because one of the things we're hearing over and over again are lodges that quite simply they've got, to Larry's point, fellow crafts who would love to be raised, entered apprentices who would love to be passed, and we're going to work toward that direction. But right now we're starting with the EA and going to give it a shot on August the 29th. I know we spilled the beans a little earlier, but we're going to start that at Minnehaha, and registration for all of these events is going to go through the Grand Lodge office so that we can make sure we don't exceed our capacity is really what that boils down to. So there'll be information coming out from Right Worshipful Brother Ryerson, and look to sign up there. You can see the next questions about Grandview. I have to say, there's a spectrum, and I had a chance, and I think I've shared this story before, but I had a chance to sit with a number of lodge secretaries, the Grand Communication in Texas. And lodge secretaries, by far, are the most robust consumer of any membership database. But by and large, they are. I think the word might be ecstatic about this opportunity. The notion that you can upload and download and do things in real time is exciting, though, not only to secretaries, but to membership committees, to guys who want to communicate easily with lodges, that those options are there. The guys in Texas said they really like their old system. They really wish they hadn't waited so long to get it. And so we haven't heard a lot of complaints yet. It may be that those lodges that are trying to work through it and are reaching out to the Grand Lodge office, may have some concerns, but it's been well received. But I'll be the first person to say I might not be the first guy somebody calls and says this stinks. It's probably going to be the Grand Secretary who gets that phone call. But that's kind of the latest there, and I hope that experience is sort of uniform throughout the jurisdiction.
So, Most Worshipful, can I jump in on add a little color to that
Please
question
do.
as well? So, from a committee, a mentoring committee perspective, we're looking at the new Grandview system to be able to help us find lodges that, from a assignment of mentors, to make sure that those assignments are being done, and so we can help reach out to lodges when it looks like there is a need to interact with those lodges through that system as well. Also putting up the various documentation that is currently out on the public Grand Lodge website to move it into the Grandview system where it will live, and you'll have access to it from an easy app that sits on your phone that you can look at the mentoring program and all the documentation that is out there. And it also gives, from a DR perspective, ability for us to look at our lodges and see where we can help out the lodge in numbers and where they need us to help engage with that stuff too. So there's lots of slices to this particular portal.
You know, and before we get to Mike's question about dues, the other Mike mentioned a document. I want to say in the last Minnesota Mason, there was a cute little square that talked about the steps to sign up for Grandview. But I know also that Keith has got something in the office and would be happy to share that. But check the Minnesota Mason, and if one of you is in front of a computer and could do that, I think that was in that last issue. Will there be a way to pay dues coming out before next year? Yeah, I know that's a goal. I was hoping, you know, it's not fair because Ralph is sitting there. Actually, he's at the Heritage Center. You can see in the background. We'll go right to the guy who's on that committee. Do you think that, to the best of your knowledge, is that pay feature going to be available before the end of the year? I wanted to say no, but I wanted to check first.
You're asking me, I assume.
Yes.
Okay. To pay through Grandview requires buying a service, so therefore it is not free at this point. We're not looking at doing that, and if we did, it would be up to individual lodges, not up to Grand Lodge. Does that answer your question? There
was a way, if a lodge had, for example, a PayPal account, there was a way to kind of sync that kind of thing up.
I'm going to jump in a little bit too, that there is a way for the lodge to set up a PayPal account through Grandview so they can process payments for lodge dues and those kind of things as well.
That is correct, but then there's a 3% charge that either comes off on the back end or the front end. And what we didn't want to get in the middle of is who pays the charge, the member or the lodge or Grand Lodge. And so we didn't address it.
Yes, okay. Unfortunately, with all credit card processing, there is that transaction fees. So
we should get in the credit card business.
There's a few players in that one already.
All right, and thank you for the post. The instructions are there. Thanks for that link. I want to mention that I'm not only saying this because there aren't any other questions there yet, because it's important. It was on the list as number one, and of course I skipped right over it. It says here 4 times, and this is for Scott Rich's sake, call your DR, call your DR, call your DR, call your DR. One of the things that we have been blessed with just excellent Grand Secretaries and Grand Office staff for decades. And one of the things is we try to keep the FTEs low and the service high is to try to run, lodge questions as best we can through the district representative. Kills 2 birds. Want to make sure the DR knows you. That's important. And secondly, it gives him the opportunity to either report that if he knows it, or find out, for his own sake and the sake of the lodges he represents, if he doesn't. So Keith is the first one to say he's always there. Phone is always on. Sometimes I worry too much, but we want to try to start hammering that home. We've got just excellent DRs in the jurisdiction, and we should use them. frequently. So call your DR. I'm looking for more questions. There's got to be something. Oh, gee, yeah, the push to have mentors within. Oh, yeah, absolutely. There are a number of members of the mentor committee here who will correct everything I say that's incorrect. But over and over again, in fact, the grand jurisdiction in California just did a massive bit of research, as did the Northern Masonic jurisdiction, and that's how you got not just a man and Mason. You know, what keeps people, and over and over again, it's relationship building. You can have all the fun stereo stuff you want during degrees. You can have excellent this, you can have great facilities and all of that, but at the end of the day, it's about relationships and creating them. And there's really no better way to do that than with the mentorship program. And the one that's been around forever has been sitting down with brothers and getting to know them. And it's been formalized through the mentorship program. But I got to say, at its root, it's about building relationships. You've all seen the guys that left your lodges, and so often they're leaving because they don't have a connection. And you want to talk about how important it is to have a mentor. It's to keep that brother in the lodge. He came there wanting to be a Mason, and shame on us if we lose him because we didn't make that connection. I want to add, and I'm grateful that Mike talked about the LRP, because he and I were going back and forth about this. It was requested of the corporate board who approved it well, it's a two-parter. Encourage the lodges, obviously, always to go through the LRP program, regardless of whether or not there's a plague. But at the same time, there will not be, we'll call it an official LRP program this year. It's been set aside because, to be quite honest, so many of the things can't be accomplished and comply with the COVID restrictions. So everything you can do. Well, it's a perfect example. We were talking about Forest Lake selling 450 some bratwurst. Find another way to do it. And isn't that kind of a flip comment to make? But it's look at what Forest Lake did. They had breakfast, small margins. They start doing things in a different way and have exploded with fundraising. So that's encourage lodges everywhere to use that just excellent program. But at the same time, things like the lodge certification can't happen, at least under the current restrictions. And so we hit pause for this Grand Lodge year. And before I go one step further, I wanted to talk about COVID, because if there could be a takeaway from this, it would be great if you, and I can't take credit for this statement. It was a superintendent of schools somewhere in the country who obviously is there trying to wade through what in heaven's name they're going to do this fall. The superintendent said to somebody, I will never know, we will never know, so this is us, we will never know if the COVID restrictions that we've implemented were more restrictive than they needed to be. We'll have no idea. But as the superintendent said, he can guarantee we'd find out if they weren't restrictive enough. And that's really the struggle that both individual lodges, the Grand Lodge, and organizations everywhere have been wrestling with. That sweet spot, prevent transmission, allow people to safely get together, and at the same time, keep anybody from getting sick. It's a fine line to walk. So thank you for all trying to walk that line as best we can. Larry, worst brother Larry down in Winona asked about lodges need dispensation to conduct business, and if so, how do you get it? We are, I shouldn't say unique, but not every jurisdiction can conduct business on the first degree. We can here, and you just have to be a master mason to vote. There are certain cases where some lodges have had to enter into loan agreements, for improvements and those kinds of things, and the code can be pretty restrictive about how that happens. It's an easy phone call to the Grand Lodge office. Keith really kind of sets the dispensation up in a way that won't get jurisprudence upset with us, and then we do the best we can to approve that, and off we go. So I haven't heard of a case yet where we weren't able to figure out a way to get from A to B. It may have been from A to C to D to E to F to B, but we were able to make that work. As you're thinking about questions, I can just feel like you wanted to talk about Minnesota Masonic Charities. And so, oh, good, we'll do that. The one thing that came up in a meeting last week, and this is another message that I think we failed to share throughout the state, is really just the breathtaking amount of support that Minnesota Masonic Charities and the organizations that came before them, the breathtaking amount of difference they've made in this jurisdiction. When we talk about what the kind of newly energized marketing committee in the Grand Lodge is working on now, it's a way to tell that story statewide with the tools that we've got. $160 million to the University of Minnesota for cancer and children's hospital, both Children's Hospital and then the new Masonic Institute for the Developing Brain. It's amazing. As you travel the country, other jurisdictions, it doesn't make sense that with 10,364 Masons, we can do what we do here. And it's because of you and the brothers who went before us. And we need to celebrate that work. And so I would encourage you to do that with frequency. There's got to be, well, half the Bornhold family is here. There's got to be more questions at least coming out of that part of the world. If you're afraid of typing, I'd give you all the license you want to unmute and ask a question. Otherwise, Terrence and I are going to start singing. It's just not possible that things are going this well in the jurisdiction. Maybe it's because we're on hold.
You have a question?
I'm sorry. Oh, I do. Oh, wait, hang on. Oh, hey, wait. A question about Masonic funerals, and yes, I'm glad you mentioned it. It's coming up, especially as we get toward the end of the year with installations, about how we do these incredibly important ceremonies that really are not only important to Masons, but obviously our families and loved ones. Where degree work is concerned, one of the reasons we had to get the custodians and the monitors to help was because it's so prescribed, so rigid. Minnesota work is Minnesota work, and so shall it always be. But in the cases of installations, and in the cases of Masonic funerals, which is what Mike was talking about, we talk about distance. I mean, you can you can do all kinds of things with a funeral home director to put together a Masonic service, maintain a social distance, and hopefully have a meaningful service for the family. It's going to be very hard to greet, for example, the widow, which we so often do on our way out of those ceremonies. Some of those things are going to be more difficult to work around. But boy, we can't not do those things, especially if with like I say, a funeral home director, we're able to find a way to do that. And I have to say, using those kinds of partnerships are exactly what we should be doing. And I should also add, especially because it seems like half of our COVID committee is here. If you had, one of the things I should mention is we're all kind of feeling our way through this time. There have been wonderful suggestions that have come out of the craft that we quite simply would not have thought of without your help. These guys are tuned in to places and resources all over the world. But so often those suggestions that come from the craft are critical. So I've got to encourage every Mason in the state who has questions about how we're approaching the virus to send them in and to submit them. And that committee is there to consider them. They have and they will continue to until we have herd immunity or a vaccine. So please continue to do that. Good point.
We have a question from Frank King. He says, my lodge in Kauai tries their business session on Zoom with opening and closing not on Zoom. Can Minnesota try this?
Currently, thank you, Frank, by the way, for asking that question. Currently, I can speak for our custodians in the room who I think are shaking their heads right now. We are not a jurisdiction that allows tiled meetings to be on a videotape currently. What we'll look like, well into the future, especially in those remote parts of the state, because as long as we're part of the family and we're talking about the state of the fraternity, let's do it and be honest. There have been, especially in less populated parts of the state, a call with technology to be able to do something just like that for some time. This jurisdiction has resisted it and currently doesn't allow those kinds of things. But I can't help but think technology continues to improve as we're able to ensure that it's just members here. And when guys are living 100 miles from one another, what other choice might we have but to close? And so it's currently not something that we do in the jurisdiction, but I can't help but wonder if in future leaders, many of whom are sitting right here, will be considering just those kinds of things. Dana was talking about yes, the widow's pin. It's an excellent point. I only get to say this because I get to give the answers, and it is a privilege to do that. Every Sunday morning, Lodge Window comes to St. Paul's Church and has that pin on. And it's a wonderful reminder to all of us who are Masons there to check in with her. And so I couldn't agree more. Ask them to do exactly that, wear those pins. Well, thanks to Billy for that comment too. It's one of the things that came up, I think the first time we were here, I had just sat in on Pleasant Groves. And, really to Frank's point, they had two members who they had not seen, the dues-paying members who'd been members of the Lodge forever but had moved out of state, came to a meeting, virtually came to a meeting. And weeks afterward, those guys were saying what a blessing it was to see those people show up, those guys show up that they hadn't seen for years, and they were able to do so because they could video in. So I'm not going to be surprised at all if even after the pandemic's over, that maybe officers' meetings, maybe social meetings continue to have a video component like this, so that guys like those can reach in. Shut-ins, for example. What a great resource if a family gets the technology set up in Dad's room. Why in the world wouldn't we connect that way, especially if he's not ambulatory? What a wonderful thing for this fraternity to do.
And most worshipful, that's one of the things, and I know we talked about that your other session where we had brothers check in on those Zoom meetings from out of state, and we talked about the fact that wouldn't it be great if at least once or twice a year we had some sort of session that we could do that, open it up and invite these brothers so that we can just stay in touch on a more regular basis with them. Would be very important. And I think officers' meetings are a great tool to use this for, because so many times, brothers, you've already got 2 lodge meetings, maybe a degree a month, and the last thing you want to do is come in for an officers' meeting every month. An officers' meeting could be done on Zoom more readily than the other stuff. We're still a belly-to-belly business. We still need to meet face-to-face, but that kind of thing, this is a great tool for, and I think it'd be something to look at going forward.
Oh, that's a good point. It's wonderful to have the resources here, because the question from Mike about Grandview options, I don't know that there were plug-in options. I think what the jurisdiction looks at is what the jurisdiction gets. However, I know there are things that are coming as current options in Grandview that are still coming, but I don't know that there are any, like you can purchase the VIP package. Or I'm struggling with the good example, but Ralph, you're not anything popping into your head?
Most of the stuff from Grandview is built specifically at the request of the Grand Lodge. So every Grand Lodge is different. Therefore, they do not create it as a modular package. If there was something that we wanted to add, Keith would probably call them and talk to them about it to find out how difficult it would be. And then they would also evaluate to find out if other Grand Lodges would like it. And then if it seems to be universal, they give it to everybody free.
Yeah, then they hand that out. Yeah, yeah. So it's a good point. If you've got specific ideas, share those with the grant secretary. And one of the reasons I think, and I think I can speak for the committee in this regard, that Grandview was their recommendation was that option. Really, that fact, their willingness to do those, just exactly what Rolf was talking about. Right, I'm going back over to comments.
Yeah, I was out for a little bit now.
All right. I guess I would ask, the group that's assembled here, or at least try to give license. We want to bring value to these Q&A sessions, regardless if it's Grand Master, Grand Secretary has done these things too. Knowing that you're in a group of brothers, and we talked about, obviously, conduct at the beginning, but there have to be questions that so often don't get asked. You're worried about, is somebody going to get upset? Is it cutting too close to the quick? I would really encourage you, if you've got anything that you've always wanted to ask, but weren't comfortable to do so, to do that.
Question from Michael Peralt. When listing the upcoming sessions, can they list them with an identifier that identifies them as a repeat?
Oh.
I don't see why not.
Yeah.
Yes, we should be able to do something along those lines.
Yeah. Terrence is brought up an excellent question about engagement, and I gotta say it's doing things like this. I seem to have about 2 ideas a year of my own, and only half of the 2 are of any worth. But you sit down with a group of brothers like this, and all of a sudden you find out. I keep going back to Forest Lake. They're doing a bang-up job with fundraising, doing something I never even would have considered. It is incredibly difficult to engage, obviously, with the restrictions that exist. However, I will say, I think so often we're maybe over worried because from 10 or 15 feet, that connection can still be made. I say we because there's at least one other Red Wing brother here. Had a brother pass away not too long ago. His wife contacted the lodge. She had some things she wanted to donate, and she would not let the brother go who stopped by. So starved for human contact was the report that I got, that she just came up with absolutely anything to talk about so that member of the lodge wouldn't leave. And shame on Red Wing Lodge number 8 for allowing one of the widows to get to that point. But I guess, as Terrence is talking about examples, don't let the plague stand in the way of at least making the connection. The virus isn't traveling over phone lines, and those kinds of simple things. It was a really somber story and a sad story, and a violation of our obligation as Masons to get a widow to that point where she was so in need of contact. And so hopefully we'll fix that. But that's just one thing that pops into my mind.
Most worshipful there. And again, we look at the fact of like calling committees, even in the best of times, calling committees to check in with brethren. But it's so important right now to establish those things. And as much as you suggest them, even as a DR to some of your lodges, we fail to do it. We fail to reach out and keep those connections. I mean, like I said, at the best of times, we should be doing that. And at the worst of times, as we are now, it's even more important, but it seems to be falling through the cracks. I don't know if it's something that needs to be reiterated from a higher level to say, hey guys, you need to be doing this. You need to be making those connections. Because I see brothers slipping away, even brothers that were, fairly active Masons that after this 6 months of very little interaction are already slipping away. Now that lodges are opening up and can have that contact again, they're still staying away. Well, I haven't missed it for 6 months. Why should I go?
Well, it's an example too, and I'm glad you brought the question up. Born out of a conversation with a local science teacher. I asked him after the spring how things went, and of course he said terribly. I think he drew an analogy that's kind of close to Freemasonry. Um, the A students were always going to be successful, and we'll call the A students, and just for fun, we'll call Terrence the A student. The Terrence Shapers of the world are always going to be involved. You could one lodge left on Earth in sub-Saharan Africa, and he's got to walk there. He's still going to go. Those guys are always going to participate. But as the teacher said, those kids that were failing, that they couldn't reach, the NPDs, that try as we might, we just have not been able to find a way to keep those guys. We're going to go. But the teacher said the frustrating part for him were the B and C students. We'll call it the guys who engage, but they're not hyper engaged. Those were lost, and those were the ones that were painful. And to Terrence's point, without the mentoring we started with, without the connections that are so critical, those guys miss one meeting, miss two, and all of a sudden becomes a habit, and then it's 12, and then they're MPDs, and then we wonder what happened to them. So it's, yeah, and we're always looking for content for columns, and I think we may have just gotten some content right there. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, it's a nice comment from Mike too, and I do want to hold up. This is incredibly unfair, Larry, but I do want to mention. I'm glad you talked about Jay Jensen's Hiram. Jay is well known to anybody in the southeastern part of the state, and if you have an opportunity to go to Winona, do. It's a wonderful way to honor a fantastic Mason.
Thank you, Grandmaster. I wanted to just, if I could, make one point to that. We are going to social distance. We're using the JC Pavilion in Winona, which is the largest facility in the town. It's an outdoor pavilion. We're hoping for good weather. There are about 150 tables in there. So you can have your own table if you'd like.
Yeah, amen to that.
Comment made by Dana Hornquist. I was just talking to Roger Taylor about the widows, and there are no lists. So try and think of a few that were close to you and check in with someone that know her of color. One thing that I've noticed in Grandview is they do have a tracking system as far as widows go and everything too. So it might be a nice organized system to keep track of that.
Yeah, and I think you're right. As we go, some of those resources are we're just learning about. We have a wonderful secretary in our lodge. There he is right there next to me on the screen. But to be able to upload historic member databases too, how many of you secretaries have gotten a call from families who wanted those kinds of historic information? Excuse me. Was Grandpa a member of the lodge, and when, and when did he join? It's just a wonderful resource. But widow tracking, what better way? If we started to do the kind of job we should be doing with the widows of Minnesota, Grandview was worth every nickel, and on that alone. Yeah, and Aaron Sims, speaking of another secretary, brings up an excellent point too. As we try to talk about philanthropy throughout the state, the kind of engagement that we get to do as Masons continues, even at times like these. And what better reason to stay a member? And of course, the secretary at Red Wing Lodge number 8 wanted to remind all of you to buy your secretaries their favorite beverage the next time you're out as a thank you for the work that they do. Thank you, Sean. Other questions? While you're thinking, it just popped into my head. I wish I could tell you exactly what was going to happen next April. I think tradition prevailing, Rolf and I have talked. I would rejoice if we can install the next Grandmaster in person. Find some way to do that in person. And everything after that is gravy. Right now, we've got the corporate board's got some decisions to make about hotel penalties before the 1st of October. And so we're going to need to make some decisions soon. But it's really a challenge you find out what you want to talk about, the great part of this fraternity and the blessing of being able to be engaged. You miss seeing all these people. I mean, you guys look great on film here. But boy, you feel yourself missing that personal contact. And so let's hope we can do something in April, but even if we can't, we're going to find a way to do that installation, I think. And hopefully we'll have some practice in November, December, and January as we try to do those things throughout the state. See if we can't find a way to do that safely. Terrence, you are raising your hand.
Most worshipful. So here's a question for you along that line. Are you going to be able to, or making any plans to, now that we're opening up the lodges, to possibly come out to some of the lodges, even with COVID and everything else, or are you on shutdown?
No, absolutely. You know, it's going to be quite different. I think I would say this to again to the DRs, ADs, and the Grand Lodge officers that are here. Wouldn't it be a great problem to go? I tell you, you may be frustrated if you drove a distance, but wouldn't it be great if you went somewhere and there were so many guys there you couldn't get in because of capacity issues? But no, what started heavens with Minnehaha here at the end of the month, or excuse me, at the beginning of this month. That's exactly what those visits are going to look like. Stopping by a local lodge and being able to do the fun part, going directly with a smaller group than we might have otherwise. But yeah, that now that the lodges are starting to meet again, trying to find a way to do that, yeah, it's exactly what we'll start doing. And I will say, and I think you lodges that have had some meetings over the summer would probably, I think, agree. Even though you could fit your normal number of attendees, there are some guys with some deep and righteous concerns about this virus. And I don't know that we're going to see them, even though they were incredibly active. To go to Minnehaha and not see Wiley Smith is unusual, but there's a reason for it. And so we may not see, really active guys like that until there's some sort of resolution. But in the meantime, yes, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, next Tuesday we'll be in Lake City, but don't all of you go because it's not very big. And I don't know if we could all fit.
I'm going to send out the poll right now. Please take time to go through it. We can keep talking, of course.
Terrence has his hand up again, apparently.
What do you got going on there, Terrence?
Well, the puppy's on the floor, so I thought I'd chat. So there again, these are questions that pop into my head. I'm sure other people have them. I know they're going to be coming up in the next few months. Thought process for having our own installations. I know a couple lodges changed over the summer. They had their voting and installation in June and such not. We're getting near that time. I mean, it's still a few months away, but if we're still in this semi kind of a lockdown, are we going to be able to adjust and do installations? Maybe not as public, maybe not, you can't have, not every lodge has that, but you can't have, 70 people there. But, are we still going to be able to do some form of, bring the guy to the altar, have him stand there, 6 feet away from the marshal and do these installations, put his own jewel on? I mean, are we thinking towards that? Because I don't see things changing before December.
No, before the end of the year. And thank you to the brother from Anoka Lodge number 30. Yes, when I think especially about small lodges in number, not so much in location, it would be and very easy to do an installation with an installing master, secretary, and marshal, and then just the installed officers, to be able to do that and to keep a distance, and as you said, to put on the jewel yourself, and that guidance should absolutely come out. We were just talking about today with Corinthian Lodge coming up in November as a for instance. But yes, it may not be able to be the kind of celebratory thing that we're used to, but I'm just hoping we can find a way to do that in person. And to your point, yes, let's do. And so, yeah, we'll do that. I have no idea. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, while we're coming towards the end here, like say the E-Mason's coming out next Wednesday. So if anybody has anything to promote, please send that in. I'll give you one example here. You have a nice thing coming up. You know, a flyer works great. We could throw this in. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Next Wednesday it goes out. So please get it in as soon as possible.
Who do we send that to?
You can send it to me directly or shoot, I can't remember the email address.
I sent it to the Grand Secretary. He'll get it there.
MinnesotaEmason@gmail.com.
Cool. If worst comes to worst, I'll send it to Jason. It'll get to you. That works.
Mhm.
Yeah, that'll be fine too.
Well, any other questions? Anything burning that you'd like to at least try to find an answer to?
When are you shaving your beard?
Yeah, that's a good point, Terrence. Thanks for that. I don't know. It's the only hair I'm able to grow now, so it's pretty exciting for me.
'Cause otherwise, we're starting to look like monks up here, you and I.
That's right. I just keep looking, then you can see it my nose. Yeah, it's as soon as the herd immunity comes. I have to say, and this is way more information than any of you could possibly care about. It's been doing a great job of hiding my double chins from been doing this long.
I think hair is overrated.
Yeah. Here's to you. Here's to you. Well, I want to thank all of you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your interest, obviously, in this Grand Lodge. And don't let questions that come up stop here. Always ask. Always reach out. We're here to serve you and serve one another. And so please keep that up. All right, thanks. That's all I got. We just and the one more thing because it says it 4 times. Call your DR. And tell Scott Rich I said it. Call your DR.
Don't tell him that.
Yeah, stop saying that.
Because, you know, they ask us the question and then we give them the answer and they go, no, that's not right.
That can't
No.
be it. No, that can't be it.
Then they call the Grand Secretary anyways.
Exactly. I have to text the Grand Secretary, literally hold it up to them, go, see, he says it's right.
I would do the same, Terrence. I'm just saying. Anyway, call your DR. Thank you all.
They're afraid.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.
Most worshipful, could you hold on for a
Yep,
second?
you too.
Thank you. Mike, if you want to kill the recording.
Oh yeah. Forgot about that.